So we're going to continue with taking a look at the founding of a nation this weekend. We're going to take a look at the founding of the Israelite nation as we were crossing the desert. And the Torah portion is actually a double one. It's Chukat and Balak. And we're going to take a look at the first one tonight. And tomorrow we're going to take a look at some of my favorite parts of all the Bible is going to be tomorrow morning, where we're going to read a little bit from the book of Micah. That's the Haftarah from the Balak Torah portion. But tonight we're going to look at Chukat. It starts off talking about a way that we can make ourselves pure if we are impure. And it involves a cow, a red cow, a certain kind of cow called a heifer, and a female cow. And it's interesting not only what is done with it, but what it says at the very end of the Torah portion, I think is very relevant for us, particularly this weekend. So we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'tzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. That's blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who makes us holy when we engage ourselves in study of Torah. We'll say the regular Aliyah when we get a minyan, and we'll read from a regular Torah. I'm reading from the Green Women's Torah, Women's Commentary, put out by the Reform Movement. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Haron lemor, and God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Zod chukat Torah asher tziva Adonai lemor. This is a ritual law, a law of the Torah, which is commanded by God that you should say. Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel. Vayikhu elecha para aduma, and that they should collect to you, bring to you, a red heifer, tamima, pure, asher ein ba mul, which doesn't have any mark on it, asher lo Allah aleha ol, which has not had on it any kind of a yoke. V'natatem, and you shall bring it, otah, to you, El Eliezer HaKohen, to Eliezer the priest, v'hotzi otah el michutz lemachaneh, and you shall deposit just outside the tent of meeting, v'shachat otah lefanav, and he shall slaughter it before everybody. V'lakach Acharon HaKohen midama v'atzba'o hizak et nochach pnei ohel moed midama sheva pa'amim, and he shall take his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times just outside the tent of meeting. V'saraf et hapader le'enav, and he shall burn the cow hapara in the eyes of everyone there. Et olah, of its skin, ve'et basara, and of its flesh, ve'et dama, and of its blood, al pirsha yisrof, and also of the stuff that it's inside it, you shall burn. V'lakach hakohen etz erez ve'ezov ushani tolaat ve'hishlich el toch serefa hapara, and the priest shall take some cedar wood and some hyssop and some red stuff and throw them into the fire, consuming the cow. V'chi bes begadav, he shall wash his clothes, hakohen v'rachatz besaro, and he shall bathe his body, b'mayim, in water, v'achar yavo el hamachaneh, and before he goes into, and afterwards he can go into the community, v'tameh hakohen ad ha'arev, and the priest will be ritually impure until the evening. Hasoref ota yechabes begadav b'mayim v'rachatz besaro b'mayim v'tameh ad ha'aref, and the one who performs the burning, that person also shall wash his clothes in water and bathes his body in water, and he also remains unclean until evening. V'asaf ish tahor et afer, and you should take someone who is pure and they shall gather up all of the ashes of the hapara of the cow, v'hiniach michutz lamachane, and deposit them outside of the tent, outside of the camp, b'makom tahor, into a sacred place, v'haita la'adat b'nei Yisrael lemishmeret lemei nida chatati, and this that they shall be kept to make a special water for purification. It is a purgation. V'chibes osef et efer hapara et begadav v'tamei ad arev v'haita livnei Yisrael lager hagar betocham lechukat olam. And this shall be a permanent law for the Israelite and for the immigrants who reside among you. I find it fascinating. At the beginning of our nation, when we are putting together our nation, it is understood that it is an impure country that we are putting together. It's not pure. And we have to set aside ways for making ourselves better. It's like we knew that from the outset. That doesn't mean that we disparage on the country if we have problems that are in need of fixing. Similarly with America, at the very outset, we did not say this is a perfect union. It's striving to make a more perfect union is what we set out to do. And we knew from the outset that it wasn't going to be pure and perfect. And we set aside rules and laws for how we can make things better. And we gave a lot of faith, we put a lot of trust and put a lot of power with the people for their day, that they can understand what's going on and they have a responsibility to mold and to shape this nation. In the Torah portion, in order to purify things, you have to find a rarity, a red cow, a red heifer. And it's kind of a sacred one. It doesn't have any marks on it, and it's never had a yoke. And in order to bring about this change, you have to kill a sacred cow. That's interesting then. I remember, I didn't read the book, but I got a kick out of the title. Someone wrote a book that's entitled Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers. I'm thinking about that, and everyone that's involved in it is rendered unclean for the day. They're rendered unclean. They need to get someone else. So when you prepare for making things better, you're killing a cow, you're killing a sacred cow, and there's something that muddies you up. It's dirty work to be doing that. I'm looking at some of the things in our nation today. And we are here to celebrate something that happened lots of years ago, 244 years ago. That's a long time ago. The founding of a nation built on dreams that all people should be free. Well, that's what was written, but at the outset, it was not the case. It was not the case that when we founded as a nation, only people who had land could vote. Only people who were males could vote. Only people who had Caucasian skin could vote. And there were many other things. We were not a perfect nation. We had the ideals of what we could be, but we did not practice them the way that we could have. We were probably better than many other nations that were out there. And we prospered tremendously, probably in large part because of how good a country we were. But through that time, between then and now, we realized some things that needed changing. And it, just like in the Israelite community, it was built into our nation. certain ways that we could make the nation better. And it was tremendous when we gave rights to poor people, people that didn't have land. And it was tremendous when we gave rights to women. And it was tremendous when we gave rights to people whose skin is different than ours. And it was wonderful that we remained a beacon for strangers to come in. In the end of our Torah portion, there's this powerful little sentence that's easy to forget. It says, this is a law for all time, Chok Olam. The Ger Hagar, not only for you, but for also for the immigrant that resides among you. This is a law for all peoples. That is an ideal that we have yet to get to. But I think that we'll become a better nation when we move towards that, when we have one law for everyone residing within our borders. Visitor, immigrant, and citizen, which is stated in the Torah. It's fascinating. There's a lot of change that's going on now. I imagine when women were talking about getting votes, they had to do some strong stuff. They had to shatter people's images of what it meant to be a citizen and say that a woman can be a citizen and a woman can vote and a woman is a person and a woman has a mind and is powerful. And I imagine some sacred cows were slaughtered for that. Sacred cows in terms of people's ways of thinking, that it's always been this way. No. Well, it might have always been this way, but it's not the way it's going to be. And the same with the abolitionist, movement. I heard something on NPR, really powerful. They assembled 6 of the descendants of Frederick Douglass, great-great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren of Frederick Douglass, to read his speech, one of the most important speeches in the history of our nation. And he read it to a group of abolitionists, 173 years ago or something like that. And he said to them, this country was founded for freedom, and the 4th of July is a time for celebration, but we are not yet free. It's not our celebration. It's a time for us to weep. It's a time for us to realize what we can be and what we should reach out to be. And he paints a realistic picture of what's going on from the slave's perspective and how we are not a perfect nation at that time. And he ends with some very powerful words. I do not despair on this nation. However much, how bad it is, I do not despair on it. Because, I'm going to add, there's so much good in the founding and in the dreams that can be built and can be changed, but it needs the people to move and to change. There are some sacred cows that are coming down. It's incredible that the flag of Mississippi is no longer going to have the Confederate stars and bars on it. That's incredible. It's incredible that all of the military bases that are named for people in the Confederacy, it looks like they're going to be changed. That's unbelievable. That NASCAR is getting rid of the Confederate flag. I don't know if you've ever been to a NASCAR event, but that's huge. That the NFL apologized for coming down on people who knelt when the Pledge of Allegiance was being sung. These are dramatic times. There are sacred cows which needed to be killed, which were not good for our nation. which are being, I hope they're being put to rest. You know, some things you look at them and, you know, when I was in New York, I always loved going to the American Museum of Natural History. And it was founded by Teddy Roosevelt. And there's this wonderful statue, big artistic statue of Teddy Roosevelt on a huge horse. And around him are Native Americans and African people. And they're sort of way below him, looking up like, kind of like, hooray, he's bringing, this white man is like our savior, is the way it's portrayed. And he's riding above nature, and nature is represented by these darker skinned people. And I had always thought of it as really a dramatic piece of art. But apparently, for decades, the museum has grappled with it being there, because it says it puts dark-colored people below Caucasian people. And that's not the best people that we could be. And they're taking that statue down. And they're taking down statues of Christopher Columbus, who I always learned was a real hero. And I think about it, and I hear about some of the things that he did. And what is the statue? A statue that is held up is, it says, this is someone who embodies values we want people to have. And you know, those statues have been up for hundreds of years. He's gotten a lot of honor for what he did. And in the ages when he exhibited values that we want to have, I guess it was appropriate for that statue to be up then. But our values are changing now, and it takes us, the people, to comment about that. And the things that Columbus did are not values that we want our people to emulate today. I was surprised to hear about a statue in Boston of Abraham Lincoln, and a freed black man that was commissioned by freed slaves. They paid for the piece. And it shows Abraham Lincoln standing above, like granting pardon, forgiveness, freedom. He's the one that is giving liberty to this man in shackles. And apparently the full story is that even though the freed slaves paid for it, they weren't involved in the designing of the statue, and they didn't know what it was going to look like. And the statue there speaks volumes in terms of the Black people depend on the white leaders to give them freedom. That is not a value we uphold today. And the stories that are written about it, when kids, little Black kids, go and look at it and say, how come that man that looks like daddy is bending down? Why is he bending down like that? That's not a value that we want to teach, that we want to uphold today. They're taking it off. They're putting it in a different place, not out in the public. I'm going to talk about one more statue that no one has talked about. I'm going to talk about a statue in Hartford, Connecticut. You know those the arches that mark the Civil War, the end of the Civil War? You know, in Bushnell Park, you know where the merry-go-round is, the carousel. Well, there's two arches. There's one that's close to the merry-go-round. There are two like towers. So the one farthest away from the merry-go-round, on the far side, you have to sort of walk off the road and go all the way to the back. If you look up, there is a statue of a Black man. Now that statue was not originally intended to be included. The arches, you should go and listen to what to the story about that. It's really interesting. It shows the soldiers coming back from the army, and they're putting down their army weapons, and they're picking up an engineer's tool. And the guy from the Navy is putting down his Navy thing, and he's picking up an industrial tool. And it's got all those prominently, and it shows the end of the war, and we're going back to prosperity. But around on the side, farthest away from the carousel, there's an African-American man with broken shackles on, still under the wrists, broken shackles, picking up a book. Now that's a very different image. Now that was actually added at the very end when someone said, you know, this Civil War isn't just about the heroes and the people that fought. This Civil War is something about freedom for Black people. And I think that this is a very different image than a Black man bending down before a white man, but a Black man picking up a book and learning and saying, I can learn, and not dependent on some white man or white woman granting them freedom, but them doing it of their own volition. This is a powerful statue. And when I go to the park, I always like to go over there and take a look at it. And I'm really moved by it. I think that this 4th of July, boy, it's hard to say, it's hard to celebrate with the pandemic going on. It's hard to celebrate, you know, what are we gonna do? You can't even go to a sporting event, let alone who's gonna see fireworks, you know? But this 4th of July, maybe we'll get closer to what the meaning of the holiday is. Yes, of course, we remember our veterans, that freedom isn't always free, that we started with a war and we had to fight for our own freedom, the War of Independence. Thank goodness we won. We give thanks to them. But we also ought to look and remember, what are we here for? Why are we different from other countries? What makes us not great, because great means big. What makes us good? Why are we a good nation? And how can we move in the direction to make it better? I don't despair on this nation. I hope you don't despair on this nation. I don't despair on it. We've got a lot of really, really good people. Let's make sure that we remind people of that. There's a few sacred cows that need to be killed. There's a few more out there. Maybe we won't do them all in our lifetime, but be aware there's some. And some we might not even know are bad right now. Maybe in another age they might come to be seen that way. But we should be open to that. Open to changing and taking down a few sacred cows. And look at what the ideals are. And I think we can hold in our heart the last line of the Torah portion. The last line of the Torah portion that I read that says, this is a law for all time. For the Israelite and for the stranger who lives within our borders, that we treat all people equal. That this 4th of July, may it lead to many, many more 4ths of July. May we have many times where we can see fireworks and hear bands and watch sporting events, and do it knowing that our country is still a good country. And may we make next year's 4th of July, may the country that celebrates be an even better country than it is today. Amen.
Amen.